Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Gosztola. I'm the curator of the Dissenter newsletter, which you can find at thedissenter.org. Also, the author of the book, Guilty of Journalism, The Political Case Against Julian Assange, regularly using this channel to cover whistleblower stories, press freedom stories, stories of government secrecy. And I'm here tonight to spend some more time on this massive development in the case of Julian Assange. We've had the last 24 hours been a whirlwind. I'm running on adrenaline. I've been doing interviews all day. I've been taking a lot of time to look at some of the responses, catch some media clips. And then right now, as I go live, and the reason why I'm a few minutes late is I was looking at what's happening in the U.S. Commonwealth Court, or the U.S. Territorial Court in Saipan in the Northern Mariana Islands. And Julian Assange, he flew in charter flight. We'll get to some of what has unfolded around the flight, but he landed in Saipan. The hearing is happening right now. I'm following updates. I think that the updates being posted by The Guardian are reliable, getting a pretty good blow-by-blow of what is happening in the courtroom. And Julian Assange, as we do this live broadcast tonight, is in the middle of the plea hearing. The judge, the federal judge, whose name is Judge Manglona, and let me get a first name if I can. Judge Manglona, Ramona V. Manglona. It's a packed court, so media did find their way to it. It's probably a pretty small courtroom. I think there's only about 40 seats for people to be in the public gallery. It sounds like family made it there. I think John Shipton, Julian Assange's father, is at the courthouse. So Julian Assange is there. He's doing all the things that are part of the formality of entering a guilty plea. Let me just take a moment to step back here, welcome you. Thank you for being here. If at any point in this broadcast you want to support the independent journalism, the work that you are hearing, I encourage you to go and donate to the Dissenter. This newsletter, especially now after this resolution in Julian Assange's case, will be a space for covering future cases like this. We don't want those cases to happen, but I've been constantly covering the war on whistleblowers, which became the war on journalism so vividly through the indictment, the charges, the jailing of Julian Assange at Belmarsh prison. So don't super chat. That goes to Google. I don't know what chunk of that I'll ever see. They take a bit out of it. So if you want to support this work, the independent journalism, you can give that way. But if you're just here to take in this news with me, I welcome you. I enjoy your engagement. Some of you who are here were probably around last night, had a chance to talk live with John Kiriakou, former CIA officer and whistleblower, Chip Gibbons, the policy director for Rights and Dissent, someone who's written articles on the Assange case for Jacobin, was here to discuss and give these raw responses, help me sort through the emotions of what was unfolding, and to process, see the photos, the image of Julian Assange walking on an airplane, to see a video of him leaving in the van from prison, from Belmarsh prison. And we've had more video. There's been more images shared by WikiLeaks today. And as I just said, we're sitting here, we're following updates. We know that he's in a U.S. court, and they are hammering out some of the finer details. I have no reason to believe that the judge isn't going to accept this plea. Both sides are working. It would appear in good faith. You have U.S. attorneys that represent the government working with the lawyers for Assange's team. And, There are a few things that stand out so far, though. However, I do find it to be a somewhat shocking development, something that I didn't expect to see. But there is this update from Helen Davidson, who is the court reporter for Guardian, saying that the U.S. has required, as part of the plea deal, that Julian Assange is to instruct WikiLeaks to destroy the information and provide an affidavit that he has done so. The U.S. attorneys are satisfied that he has done this. I have to laugh at that because this is 15-year-old information almost. There's all sorts of sites. It's been republished. There are mirrors. What's an original? The documents that Manning provided WikiLeaks, you can delete them, and then the files that are out there on the internet could be downloaded and added back to drives that could be backed up and maintained in an archive by WikiLeaks. It's security theater. And what does the US government even think they are doing, forcing Julian Assange into this kind of ritual? But fine. He's smart enough to know that this is some kind of stupid formality. You might remember what The Guardian had to do with a drive that had held files from NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden. The UK government sent police, I believe, to watch The Guardian take a hammer to a hard drive that had held files from Snowden, and they destroyed that hard drive, even though all of the reporting had been done. The files were posted. The files were in places backed up, but the original files were on this drive, and the police made The Guardian, in an act of drama, an act of security theater, destroy this hard drive in front of police. And I guess that's where we are in these supposed Official Secrets Act like prosecutions, or Espionage Act like prosecutions. And there is no, oh, they're doing this so the United States can't be held accountable in the future. We already have all this information. It's frivolous and silly that they would make this a part of the plea deal. It's just basically like a show of dominance, essentially. And they're just flaunting the fact that they could make Assange do whatever they demand at this moment because he would like his freedom. I mean, he's in a courthouse in Saipan. I don't know if this was part of the plea negotiations, but whatever he's asked to do, he's probably going to comply. He's never been this close to returning home to Australia. So here we have them asking for destruction of files. Oh, what does WikiLeaks care? They've got a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, and that's just as good as the original files that Chelsea Manning submitted to WikiLeaks. So welcome. Thank you. I'm tuned in. I'm following. I understand that in about 2.5 hours, he'll be on a plane to Canberra, Australia. I don't actually know where Julian Assange is going to call home. I don't know what is home for Julian Assange. Julian Assange has not been in Australia for more than 10 years, more than 12 years, maybe 14, 15 years. It's been quite a long time. It's been quite a long time. It's long overdue, and we are just a couple of hours from Julian Assange getting on a plane and going to Australia. And we've seen that officials from the Australian government have accompanied Julian Assange. They're on their they are along for this freedom flight, as the Assange defense campaign team and Free Assange News have dubbed this. It's this freedom flight that Julian Assange is required to pay £520,000 to fund this charter flight. This flight to go to a courthouse in a U.S. territory, and he is raising money. I understand right now the crowd funding that has been done for it so far. We have, if you go to the page, I understand that there's about half that has been raised. I'm gonna have to dig up the link here, and I'll do that probably when I play a clip. I'll go ahead and dig up a clip for or the link for you. I want to share this. I want to encourage you to give so that Julian Assange doesn't have to foot the bill for his flight. The U.S. government should be paying for his flight. They should be saying, which we know they won't do, but they should be saying, "We're sorry we jailed you for 5 years." They shouldn't be forcing him to plead guilty to any crime, and they should be returning him to his country, doing whatever they can to help Australian officials escort him back home if they would like to be involved in doing so. All right, so let me just check in here. There will be, I believe there will be an effort among supporters to file the paperwork for a presidential pardon. I do think that there will be people, especially here in the US. I'm willing to support that effort to say, just as I support it for Chelsea Manning, because we can go beyond a commutation. You could ask for a pardon for Chelsea Manning. And there are a number of whistleblowers who deserve this as well. Whistleblowers who were prosecuted under the Espionage Act who deserve this. And then for Julian Assange to clear his name, there's definitely going to be plenty of opportunity over the coming years to make this even more of a matter for politicians to get involved and clear Julian Assange's name, because there wasn't any reason that was justified when it comes to this criminal case. It's a political case. It was always at the discretion of the U.S. government, of the U.S. Justice Department, to charge Julian Assange. This is not about enforcing the law. This is not about making sure that somebody was held accountable for their actions, despite what you may see on any news programs or how they would frame it. And I actually think that I think that so much of the news media is bored with how this ended. If you look at the coverage, it's humdrum. I don't think this is what they wanted. I think they wanted a spectacle of Julian Assange on trial in the US. And to see him walk free, they don't really know how to deal with that. First off, they didn't imagine he would ever walk free. It goes against everything they understand about this case. And that's why they should ask questions. That's why they should go to the US government and challenge what was done. All the resources, all the funds, taxpayer money, everything that they put into this, all the time that they spent defending this in public. They were very minimal in the way that they defended it in public. I spoke about that several times, showing clips of spokespeople asked by reporters to comment on the Assange case, and they said, no, go to the Justice Department. Well, the Justice Department never commented. It was an ongoing case. So I think that right now, as we look at this, a pardon is something that we will have to fight for in the next few years. Okay, back to Julian Assange. Back to, he's in the plea hearing right now. I'm seeing some more updates I would like to just bring in here. one of the U.S. attorneys at this moment is going through some of the details of the information that Manning downloaded and then provided to WikiLeaks, understanding that at least some of them will be publicly posted. Okay, again, all of this is in service to the plea deal. U.S. attorneys are reading details on the crime to willfully and unlawfully obtain, deliver, and transmit confidential information belonging to the United States defense. So he pled guilty to conspiracy. He didn't actually plead guilty to committing the crime itself, but conspiracy to commit the crime. And apparently there's something about Assange publicly soliciting information from people who had then current or prior classified information. So here's where I really do have to speak up and say that it's wrong that this would be in the plea deal, but I understand Assange wants freedom. We as press freedom advocates, we who care about the First Amendment, and we who also care about the facts and what happened, we need to push back against this talk about WikiLeaks publishing a most wanted list of leaks, including CIA databases, that they wanted CIA databases, that they were seeking Iraq and Afghanistan rules of engagements, Guantanamo Bay interrogation techniques, CIA interrogations videos, and information about certain weapon systems. I don't know why any of this has to be brought up in this courtroom, because none of that material was ever provided by Manning. This most wanted leaks list, and this is in my book, Guilty of Journalism, The Political Case Against Julian Assange. It's now a history book. It's now a history book, but it'll always exist as something that can very clearly counter the falsehoods and this narrative of the U.S. government. So to stand in this courtroom in a commonwealth, okay, it's a territory, it's not a state, but hey, it's still the same rules that they would have to follow as far as the facts in the Eastern District of Virginia have to be adhered to in this Commonwealth court. And so none of this is backed up in fact. Would presume, though, that Julian Assange and his team are giving the U.S. prosecutors a wide latitude to put whatever narrative they want, whatever spin they want on this conspiracy plea. Why? Because first and foremost, this is a transaction. This is a transaction. And I'm going to have some clips later on in this broadcast. At the end of this hour, towards the end of it, we will play some clips from the throwdown that took place on Piers Morgan's Uncensored show. I've gotten extremely tired of all the panels about Gaza, and I don't think they amount to anything of value. My colleague Rania Khalek went on one and was treated terribly. I played a clip on this channel, treated just disgustingly by Piers Morgan. That said, this panel, two people who were for Assange's freedom, two people who were grotesquely against Julian Assange's freedom. It took place. They posted this video. I took some clips from some of my more the more amusing parts of this, and so we'll get to that'll be, I guess we'll call it tonight's entertainment. It's not like it really gives us anything more than a kind of junk food satisfaction. So we'll play that though for entertainment. Let me play this clip from today. So right now they're in court and we are seeing some movement. We're seeing some resolution, but we weren't here yet earlier. And there was a State Department press briefing with Matthew Miller. Matthew Miller used to be the Justice Department spokesperson when these files were first published in 2010 and 2011. And then he left the Obama administration, and he was quoted in a noteworthy Washington Post article discussing the First Amendment problem, or sorry, the New York Times problem that got in the way of Barack Obama's Justice Department charging Julian Assange with crimes. There was an interest in going after Julian Assange just as the military went after Chelsea Manning, but ultimately that did not happen. And so I have this clip here ready to play of the State Department briefing these reporters. They mightily tried to get Matthew Miller to comment on the development, this incredible development. Julian Assange left Belmarsh. He's gone to this court in Saipan. He's going to head to Australia. Australian officials are celebratory, so are his supporters. But Matthew Miller did not want to talk about this case at all.
I sort of expected you were going to say it's an ongoing judicial matter, but
you're going to ask anyway.
What was the value of? What was the importance for the United States of reaching a plea deal with him? Why was it important to settle this?
So you're right. It is an ongoing judicial matter, and so I am really limited in what I can say, where I can't really say anything about that. I know that the Justice Department has published court documents related to this case. I know he's scheduled to appear in court in the coming hours, and given that it is a pending case that is about to go before a federal judge, I think it's appropriate for me to not comment on the matter at this time.
Sure, I'll try a little bit more, but obviously he's an Australian citizen. Can you talk about the nature of discussions between the United States and Australia at the diplomatic level? How was this important to resolve for the sake of the alliance between the U.S. and Australia?
Again, I think while the matter is pending, it's important for me not to comment on it at all. Maybe tomorrow we'll have more to say, but I think today I should refrain from commenting and defer to the Department of Justice.
Okay, unless anybody wants to pursue that.
Yeah, go ahead.
This obviously has been a source of disagreement between Australia and the United States. Do you consider that this matter is now on the cusp of being resolved?
So I appreciate you trying, but I think I'm going to go back to the days when I was the Department of...
This devil thinks this is like some kind of game show. He treats it as a game. And honestly, that's what flack do, these paid liars. They sit there and they invite with glee reporters to create these questions, try to do verbal gymnastics, see if they can come up with the right formula that pushes them into a corner and forces them to answer a question. And it's gross, it's gross. We're talking about somebody whose life has been destroyed because the U.S. government relentlessly targeted him and his family. He'll never get back. It's been robbed from him. 5 years of his life in Belmarsh, as well as the time that he lived under political asylum in the Ecuador embassy, and it was a rightful fear. He believed if he left the Ecuador embassy, he would be arrested by British authorities, and then he would face extradition to the United States. So yeah, here he is playing this game. I'll go ahead and continue the rest of the clip.
Appreciate you trying, but I think I'm going to go back to the days when I was the Department of Justice spokesperson, and when we had a matter pending in court that was about to go for a federal judge, I think I very much would have objected to the State Department spokesperson opining on it from the podium before the matter was resolved, so I'm sorry.
Well, then maybe you could tell us what you think about having this case heard by a judge in a trench.
I think that is
the Pacific Ocean.
I think that is a matter for the Department of Justice to comment on, not the State Department.
I was wondering if this releases a sort of a relief
funny.
for the State Department when it comes to your engagement with.
I hate to interrupt, but I only interrupt to say you're going to get the same answer that I have given with respect to the other questions. It just isn't appropriate for me while this is pending and about to go for a federal judge to comment on any way. The matter's not yet resolved. Once it's resolved, maybe it'll be a different case, but not today.
The matter's not yet resolved. It was pretty resolved. The United Kingdom granted him bail. They let him walk out of Belmarsh prison. We saw paperwork that this was resolved. There's no appeal hearing. There's no extradition proceedings. There was a hearing scheduled for July 9th and 10th. Some of the most dedicated reporters who have covered this case were planning to go and travel and cover it in London. And I was going to pay a reporter for the dissenter if I didn't get access to observe through a video link, because the royal courts came up with this bullshit that you couldn't have access anymore if you weren't in England and Wales, primarily because they wanted to be able to hold you in contempt and jail you if you violated the court's rules. But anyways, yeah, it was pretty resolved, and it's being resolved right now. It's being further resolved as I do this live broadcast, and the judge is asking once more, repeatedly asking Assange to confirm that he wishes to plead guilty, according to Helen Davidson at The Guardian, be subject to the punishment, waive rights to an indictment, trial, appeal, statute of limitations, so on and so forth. And McKenzie, who is working for the U.S. government, has said that once the plea agreement is accepted and sentence is pronounced, U.S. attorneys will lodge proceedings in the Eastern District of Virginia at the very moment to dismiss the other charges, and then the agreement will come into immediate effect. So there were 17 charges that Julian Assange faced. This is the resolution. The resolution is that this is over. They are done. The National Security Division, the National Security Division of the United States, has tired of prosecuting Julian Assange. It's my view that the steadfastness of Julian Assange and his supporters globally, from press freedom organizations to human rights organizations, together we outlasted the U.S. government. There's just not much in it for the U.S. government anymore, and they got their flesh. They got what they would like. He spent 5 years in Belmarsh prison. So in order to back up what I'm saying, I'd like to play a clip of James Clapper. James Clapper was on the he was on CNN late last night, a little less than 24 hours ago. I just have to find this clip here. Okay, here we go. Here it is. Let me play this for you. I'm going to pull this up. Bear with me. How are you all doing out there? I'm seeing some of your comments. I'll go back and include some of what you're saying. If there's anything in particular that you would like me to answer as far as questions, I don't know what information I can gather for you if you would like to know. Yes, Smirkula lives up to his nickname, but I've never seen him quite so pleased with himself as in that last clip. Oh, he was having a great time. He loved that no matter how many times those reporters asked him a question, he was going to be able to tell them, go fuck yourself, basically. He wasn't going to answer their question. It was pretty obscene. I'm not being obscene. He's the one being obscene. And it's pretty obscene every day that he stands up there and answers questions like that, and especially when he's being asked to confront the atrocities that are unfolding in the war on Gaza. So here's the clip of James Clapper, former director of national intelligence, here to represent the U.S. security state and to speak about this resolution to the Assange case.
Assange. I know this has been what we've been talking about for many, many years about what he would happen to him. You were actually president, Director Clapper, of National Intelligence when he released the trove of classified documents.
Hey, hang on. Sorry, I just have to draw your attention to the chyron down here. This is one of my biggest peeves. Hero or traitor? It's such a boring and trite framing. They did this to Chelsea Manning. They do this for whistleblowers that are prosecuted under the Espionage Act. They're doing it now with Julian Assange, but all the time, it was always this very boring framing, hero or traitor. Some people think that Julian Assange is an incredible truth teller who published documents that have changed the world and brought out injustices and yada yada. But some people think that Julian Assange is responsible for the Taliban beheading hundreds of boys and girls, and the fact that everyone lives backward in Afghanistan. And it's just the worst. It's absolutely terrible that that's the way the media approached this. What are the facts? What are the facts? I never filtered it through that framing because I'm not gutless. But the way that we should talk about this is that Julian Assange was prosecuted by the U.S. government. What for? What was he prosecuted for? What was the basis for those allegations? Again, I did a whole book on this. I laid out the allegations. I went through the genesis of this case, what Julian Assange published, and you don't have to filter it through some fake debate, hero or traitor. We're not children. What did Julian Assange do? Why did the U.S. come after him? Now talk about how come the U.S. government is backing down from pursuing this political case. Anyways, here is James Clapper.
How do you feel about this plea deal tonight?
Well, Laura, this may come as a surprise to you, but I actually think this came out pretty well. I think critical to this was his plea of one count of espionage. I think the law enforcement community and the intelligence community wouldn't have bought into this without that. But he's served essentially 7 years of incarceration in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Was released from that, and then the Brits arrested him, and he did 62 months in jail, hard time in London. So he's sort of, paid his dues.
Okay. There's a lot to go over there. I'm going to stop. And yes, this is James Clapper, who I don't have balding. So he scratched his head and he lied to Senator Ron Wyden about NSA surveillance. And then Edward Snowden was further inspired to release documents exposing mass surveillance. And it's a clip. It's a classic clip. Sorry, I don't have it handy. Anytime James Clapper is shown, I probably should play that clip. It just should probably be in my archive, and I'm sorry that I'm not prepared. But I do have this clip. Anyways, what does that have to do with Assange? Nothing, except that the attitude of the U.S. government is that they're free and democratic and didn't do anything wrong to Julian Assange. Anyways, James Clapper is saying the security agencies could have opposed the U.S. Justice Department negotiating a plea. But they got behind this. They said, all right, as long as he pleads guilty to an Espionage Act violation, we will accept. And we'll accept because he did do hard time. He was in Britain's Guantanamo. That's what they call Belmarsh. Britain's Guantanamo. It's been nicknamed that. Right after the September 11th attacks, they brought a lot of terrorist suspects, people there, people who were convicted. They jailed them at this facility. It's a place that is harsh. He was in some form of solitary confinement for about 22 to 23 hours a day, limited access to recreation. Julian Assange, as James Clapper put it, paid his dues. Paid his dues. And I'll continue here.
Did 62 months in jail, hard time in London. So he's sort of, paid his dues. I will say, contemporaneously, there's great concern about the revelations that he made
Right.
at the time, particularly where it could have put at risk people or compromised sources and methods. That's always the thing that the intelligence community worries about.
Do we know that he has that hasn't happened? Is that why you feel this is it's ended up correctly or well, that we don't know that he's done that or it hasn't had that effect?
Well, there was a damage assessment done at the time, and there was concern, although I don't recall any direct proof that, for example, assets in Afghanistan, Iraq, who were helping the United States, were exposed. I think another issue here, speaking on.
Hang on, though. Like, let's not gloss over that, Jim. I mean, Jim, the United States government, through its agencies, have consistently complained and said that Julian Assange endangered and that people were put at risk and WikiLeaks had blood on his hands, and without any proof whatsoever. And now he's nonchalantly just admitting that there was never any proof that the Taliban killed anybody, murdered anybody, by referencing WikiLeaks documents, that assets or confidential human sources were ever killed. And that's actually fact. I can tell you from covering the court-martial against Chelsea Manning that the military prosecutors tried to lie to the judge and say that the Taliban killed someone after reading the WikiLeaks document or reading the Afghanistan war logs. And then that was objected to by the defense for Chelsea Manning. And then the judge had to confront the prosecutors and say, what are you trying to tell people? And basically, like, the Taliban had pointed to a document, or they had made up this idea that somebody was killed. And then, as it turns out, that name was never in the WikiLeaks documents. So, they murdered somebody, they executed someone, and then they said that they had gotten the name from a document. It turned out that was false. That person was not named in the WikiLeaks documents. Okay, so the prosecutors lied to the military court. They were scolded by the judge. I remember this vividly. And we went on, and it was clear that no one, not a single person was killed as a result of WikiLeaks publications on the Afghanistan war. So again, Jim, you don't have to casually just move on from this. This is the issue. This is the issue. So much of this prosecution was claiming that Julian Assange published material that revealed the names of confidential human sources. And then, I don't know what, death, injuries resulted. Nothing to back any of that up whatsoever.
I think another issue here, speaking on behalf of the intelligence community, is you can't have a system where people on their own unilaterally decide, well, I just think it's okay to expose all this classified information when they've made a commitment to protect it. That to me is a very important principle to bear in mind here. But I'll end where I began. I think justice is served.
So Clapper thinks that justice was served. I've got a little bit more of this in front of me. I have a transcript. I don't know if the rest of the clip is available, but it is worth sharing with you that along for this segment was David Sanger. And David Sanger was working for the New York Times when he was when these documents were published by WikiLeaks. And the New York Times, atrocious when it comes to Julian Assange, because their executive editor, Bill Keller, lied or was very disingenuous to talk about Julian Assange as if he was a source. He came to the New York Times. He wanted to work with them. Julian Assange did. and they mistreated him. They did not want him to be an equal. I think they were threatened by what Julian Assange was trying to do through WikiLeaks. But they wanted the information. They wanted to be able to go through it and publish the scoops that they were willing to publish. And so David Sanger worked on some of the cables, is what he said in this CNN segment. I'll put David Sanger up. Actually, David Sanger is an important person to just identify. He's my example. He's the example that I always used to try and make the argument that it was important for liberals or Democrats to care about what Donald Trump had unleashed. Because, in fact, when you think of, hang on one second, I'm just going to pull this over here. So I want to make sure everyone can see David Sanger. So this is what I am talking about. Here he is. This is David Sanger. Just so we know who we're talking about, David Sanger at the New York Times. And he's written some books about cybersecurity, and he practices access journalism. Unlike WikiLeaks, he practices access journalism, which is to negotiate with officials about what I'm back. I just had to clean up my internet here. So here I am, and let me finish what I have to say about David Sanger. So on the segment, or on this CNN segment, he is asked about what Director Clapper said. And his comment is that Julian Assange was not Chelsea Manning. He was not a U.S. government employee. Assange never made commitments to protect and keep information secure. That's true. He never signed a non-disclosure agreement, a security clearance. He's pleading guilty right now to a conspiracy to violate the Espionage Act in a manner that suggests that when journalists obtain information, they have a responsibility to call the U.S. military or call the NSA or the CIA and say, I have some documents, and I believe that they should be returned. And I don't think that's anything that any reputable journalist would ever do. David Sanger says that Assange was not a journalist. He was taking this data and just throwing everything out there because WikiLeaks had this sort of anarchic concept of full transparency. He didn't do what I think you and I would consider what journalists do: sift through material, figure out what's important, exercise some judgment about what you publish and what you don't, excise the names of people whose lives could be at risk. Those are all things that we and other news organizations went and did. Okay, here's the problem with what David Sanger said there. And I think you can recognize it, but the problem here is that Julian Assange did not do these things because he partnered with media organizations to do this in collaboration with WikiLeaks. To do this and help achieve the greatest amount of impact, particularly with the cables, we saw these media partnerships where WikiLeaks went around to countries all over the world, gave them access to cables from that country, and made sure that publications got the information that was in the most public interest to their citizens so that it could help address wrongdoing and bring the truth out. Sifting through the material, these media organizations that were partners did that with WikiLeaks. figuring out what's important. Those journalists were brought on to do that, exercising some judgment about what to publish. They advised WikiLeaks on what were documents worth publishing. The rest remained in an archive, and they were part of the wider database that historians and archivists, people who care about this material, academics, others could go through and always refer to. It's there for a reference. Yes, those are things that news organizations do. WikiLeaks did it too. What we need to understand is this is false, that WikiLeaks just got the material and dumped it without ever looking at it, without even caring about the material. Sure, some of it was mishandled. There's a clear difference between the two war log sets. You have the Afghanistan war logs published. Okay, there's a lot of condemnation for how they could have spent more time with the material. Those issues were corrected with the Iraq war logs, and they partnered with the Iraq Body Count Project, who helped them uncover incidents of torture, tally up those incidents of torture, and also to show that there were 15,000 civilian deaths in Iraq that were previously unknown. Excuse me. All right, so I'm satisfied with all of that. And let me take some time to go through some of your comments. And I understand that court is in recess. We're waiting to see that the guilty plea has been accepted. I promise you this broadcast will not end before we know that Julian Assange is leaving court and on his way to the plane to go to Canberra. But I cannot do this for 3 more hours. And I will have to come back tomorrow or later to cover anything related to the homecoming, the beautiful scene that we're going to see Assange arriving in Australia. But okay, so just a quick item again. If you would like to subscribe to more updates on whistleblowers, more updates on press freedom, more updates on struggles against government secrecy, I recommend that you subscribe to this. It's a free newsletter. And then if you're motivated and you want to support independent journalism, you can kick in a few bucks a month and be a subscriber. And I'm working on doing something on Boeing whistleblowers. I've got something coming that will honor and celebrate all of the people who have resigned from the Biden administration over the war on Gaza. They're whistleblowers or dissenters or somewhere in between. None of these people have really taken documents, but that it doesn't really matter because some of them have shared what they saw on the inside at different phases of the war. And here's where you can go to donate if you don't want to subscribe. Some people prefer to just throw in $5, $10 just to help me keep going with this independent journalism. And I thank those people. And it's simple. And I understand not having a recurring charge. So if that's your way of doing things, there's no difference in my mind. It's all support for journalism. And we've got to support independent media. And I thank those of you out there who, many of you I know by name, because it's a small group of people and a dedicated group of people who have been there to make possible what I do. So let me just look back here at some of these comments before we get too far away. And this is good. There's a press conference when he arrives in Canberra. I'll go back and watch that, but I presume that's going to happen while I'm sleeping. And Julian Assange has to take some time to himself to focus on his health. Belinda, who's been a good supporter, all that's happened to her 14 years is embedded in my memory due to what's happened. They hoped we would forget. We do not. No, we spend a lot of time keeping all of the different sprawling parts of this straight. It's difficult, but as we hit this resolution, there's it's still possible to have a narrative that puts all the players in the right buckets. Like these are the people who wanted Julian Assange to not be free, to die in prison. These are the people who were fighting tirelessly to try and free him. And we know who was on what side. And then thank you, Lady Alex. Grateful to Peter B. Collins for turning me on to Kevin years ago. I do appreciate seeing you and interacting with you here on this channel. And Belinda, we took the trust fall and we held him up, and we have together won this massive fight. Yep. Judge asked Assange what Assange did to constitute crime. Working as a journalist, I encouraged my source to provide information that was said to be classified in order to publish that information. That's interesting. Well, here it is. Breaking news, official. Judge has accepted the guilty plea. It's a finding of this court that the plea of guilty is accepted. The defendant is found guilty. So now we have a 20-minute break, and that was known. But accepting the guilty plea, what it means now is I think they have to do the sentencing part in this one particular hearing. A lot of this is all just formality. So now they'll go about very quickly having a sentencing hearing. Usually people would do the prosecutors would hold the sentencing hearing separate from this plea hearing. It's not often, and actually it's exceptionally rare for both of them to be the same proceeding. Alrighty. That's let's see. I think I had one more. Was there one more thing I want? Oh, here's something. This is very short. I found this to be funny.
And we should mention he was also responsible in 2016 for releasing some emails from the campaign chair of Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, which played a role. But those are not any part of these charges, but something to note. Nick Robertson in London live for us this morning. I appreciate you.
I'm just going to play that one more time. What I love about this is Sarah Seidner, that's the name of the anchor. She has such a grudge against Julian Assange, or she knows that her friends from the Democratic Party or from the Hillary Clinton camp have such a grudge that she has to mention it. She can't go through this without saying that he published Clinton campaign emails. He did. But then in the same breath, she has to admit that it's got nothing to do with this story. It has absolutely zero to do with Julian Assange being prosecuted over the last 5+ years. Because who indicted him? It was Donald Trump's Justice Department. They didn't care at all that Julian Assange published emails from Hillary Clinton's campaign. They liked that those campaign emails were all over. And the Democrats know that. That's why they blame Julian Assange for Trump, even though it's their own fault. Even though Hillary Clinton lost. She was a bad candidate.
And we should mention he was also responsible in 2016 for releasing some emails from the campaign chair of Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, which played a role. But those are not any part of these charges, but something to note. Nick Robertson in London live for us this morning. I appreciate you.
Something to note. No, it's only something to note if you haven't gotten over the past. And these people like Sarah Seidner and others are incapable of moving on from 2016. Absolutely incapable. They're constantly reliving it. So I had to share that with you. Thank you, Cyril. I appreciate this donation. I hope I can get a good chunk of it. What does Google take? I think Google takes like 10%. Do we go to one of my more amusing and entertaining clips that I have for you from Piers Morgan Uncensored? I'll keep my eye on the proceedings in Saipan in the U.S. Territorial Court. But here. So this first, we gotta do this. We gotta say, there's the campaign page, 262,844 pounds as of 9 p.m. Eastern. I think less than a day for this. There's 27 days left in the campaign to raise. They're going to raise enough money. They're going to cover Julian Assange's expenses because the U.S. government made Julian Assange foot the bill for his charter flight to freedom. And that just says it all. You know, something kind of like this happened when Chelsea Manning was held in contempt. The grand jury jailed her for a year, and she defied and resisted, refused to testify against Julian Assange. And so the U.S. government never had any testimony from her to put in the indictment. There was no perjury trap that they were able to lay. And they weren't able to turn the source against Julian Assange in service to their prosecution. But the judge was charging about $500 a day, $500 a day for 30 days, then $1,000 a day after that. And it all added up. And I think she owed like $250,000 by the time she left the jail in Alexandria Detention Center. And so that was all money she had to fundraise. And the court had to be paid off for all of the fees, all of this penalty. Horrible. So the charter flight is a lot like what they did to Chelsea Manning, the authorities. Because that was with the consent of the U.S. government. They were perfectly fine with the judge extracting thousands of dollars a day from Chelsea Manning, who was not going to testify against Assange, nor should she. Let's play this. This comes from the most recent edition of Piers Morgan Uncensored, most recent edition as of Tuesday, June 25th. And I'm going to play clips from it. If I had more time to sit here, we could all grab some popcorn and candy and sit back and watch 25, 30 minutes of this kind of commentator death match. But we'll just watch 4 clips that I have pulled from here. And they're with, so it's Ben Ferguson, who is a conservative commentator. I don't know everything about his background. There's Louise Mensch, who I believe is from the UK, and she's not mentally well. And she is sociopathic. Perfect guest for this show. And then there's Michael Schellenberger, who published the Twitter files. And we got Judge Andrew Napolitano, who I'm pretty sure of all the 4, he's probably the most well-known. So here is the first clip.
Because, and I hate to say this, Piers, but I am going to take my life in my hands here. You were wrong and your introduction was wrong, and the entire discussion is wrong when it posits that Julian Assange has been indicted for publishing something. He has not been indicted for publishing anything, and indeed he is pleading guilty to being more than a publisher. He's pleading guilty to breaking the Espionage Act, to helping Chelsea.
Whoa, okay, hold on. We can go back to this junk in a moment. All right, I'm monitoring this. I want to, the more moment that Assange walks out of court, I want to be on top of that. Here we go.
Because, and I hate to say this, Piers, but I am going to take my life in my hands here. You were wrong and your introduction was wrong, and the entire discussion is wrong when it posits that Julian Assange has been indicted for publishing something. He has not been indicted for publishing anything, and indeed he is pleading guilty to being more than a publisher. He's pleading guilty to breaking the Espionage Act, to helping Chelsea Manning hack and release that stuff. He was never indicted for publishing anything, and he's admitted it. He is admitting to be a felon that broke the Espionage Act by helping Chelsea Manning hack and release that information, and there is nothing
but hang
in
on.
the
All right.
amendment that covers that.
Hang on, you picked
Nothing.
up. Okay, let me respond to that. Technically, what you just said is correct. However, the reality is he's done a plea deal so he can get his freedom after all this time in semi-incarceration in the Ecuadorian embassy, then in one of the worst prisons in the country. I mean, it's one of the toughest places to be incarcerated, Belmarsh. And the reality is he didn't steal these documents. He was given them by somebody who did break the law, Chelsea Manning.
He aided and
Pass them to... Well, hang on, let me finish. Pass them on to him, and he...
Listen to these clowns just parrot phrases from the indictment. He aided and abetting. He's a conspirator. Just like parrots, a couple of parrots.
He acted as a publisher, as indeed the newspapers
and
did.
encouraged it, Piers.
Well, yeah, listen.
He encouraged it.
We
he
have
said,
had,
give me more.
Well, hang on. Let me finish.
Feed me.
As Louise knows, there was a massive scandal in Britain involving politicians, many of whom were her former colleagues. You were a member of Parliament, in which exactly the same scenario, a document containing all sorts of secrets about MPs' expenses was passed to a Daily Telegraph. Interestingly, the editor who published it was Will Lewis, who's currently in the firestorm surrounding the Washington Post, where he's the publisher now. But the principle, surely, was the same. It was an illegal act to steal this information, but the editor of the newspaper believed it was overtly in the public interest to expose the fact loads of your colleagues in Parliament had been on the take with public money. What's the difference?
And I don't dispute it, and may I just say that I came into Parliament in the term after that scandal, so I personally am not guilty. I have no problem with embarrassing governments. That's what the press is there for. Publish and be damned. But you know who disagrees with you, Piers, in your analysis of this situation? Julian Assange, because he's admitting that what you just said and said at the beginning is completely false. He is pleading guilty to assisting Chelsea Manning.
Well, he's done a deal to save himself. Well,
Sorry, let me unmute. In my rage, I had to come back in there. She doesn't know how plea deals work, and you're going to hear the judge get into her because this is transactional. Judge Napolitano is going to set her straight here.
Okay, so your argument, Piers, is that he is
No. He's done a deal. Hang on. He's done a deal to avoid being extradited to the United States, where who the hell knows what would have happened to. That's why he spent hundreds of thousands avoiding going to mainland America.
Let me jump in.
Let me go to the judge for the legal part of this. Yeah.
As a judge, I have taken more than 1,000 guilty pleas in my career. Fully half of them were for crimes the defendant didn't commit. We all know that. It was to relieve the defendant of the burden of prosecution in order to accept a deal that the government was willing to give him. The government in the United States always over indicts, charges for more crimes than they think they can prove, so that the defendant will accept a guilty plea to some lesser event. He is pleading guilty tomorrow in a federal court in the middle of nowhere to the conspiracy to violate the espionage laws and agreement to do so. Don't you think the New York Times and the Washington Post encouraged Daniel Ellsberg to give them the Pentagon Papers? And
I
surely
feel,
the Supreme Court knew that.
I do feel the same way about the Telegraph and the MP's expenses.
There it is. There it is. Don't the Washington Post and the New York Times' reporters do this every day? Solicit classified information? Yes, they do. Solicit information, generally speaking? Yes, they do. Obviously, they're not going to just ask for classified. They want whatever information is relevant to the story they are trying to produce. Just checking. It looks like they're still in recess. So that's that clip. Okay. I encourage people to have a beverage. I encourage you to be eating, because this is the entertainment portion. Let's go on to this next clip. I'm not playing the entire thing, so you don't have to hate me entirely for torturing you. You can always leave, but then you wouldn't be able to share in this fun, because it's absolutely nuts what is being said in this broadcast. And this is particularly nutty.
Case that anybody has found that anybody died due to the release of Julian Assange, of the documents by Julian Assange. In fact, quite the opposite. They found they found that it had not. Even Joe Biden. Let me finish. Allow me to finish.
Okay, let Michael finish. I'll come back to you.
Even President Biden had admitted that it had not resulted in any deaths or any sacrificing of national security. Now, on the issue of asking for documents, I think it is important for investigative journalists to know that they can't solicit information from their whistleblowers. You have to be very disciplined about this. Anybody who's a working journalist and has spoken to their lawyer about this knows they need to be careful. And we also need to be careful not to redact the information before we release it. I agree there was some carelessness there. However, the punishment was far more severe than any misdeeds here. Again, nobody was harmed. No national security was undermined by this. It is true.
Wait, let me do the... I got to do the Louise Mensch face.
And it was found by repeated investigations. And the point here is that this was clearly designed to chill investigative reporting, which is absolutely protected by the Pentagon Papers and by the First Amendment. And I think that, this severe of a punishment was aimed at scaring off many journalists. Many journalists have become cowards on this issue. I'm shocked by the stories that other journalists have passed on, that my colleagues and I have decided to cover, which is very clearly covered by the First Amendment and is now, I think, being undermined in some ways. And just like you said, Piers, in this case, Assange chose to be with his wife and children and accepted a plea deal, but he was not responsible for the national security violations.
Well, let me bring Ben in. So Ben, look,
Yes,
Ben, look, you stated as a fact that a lot of people died as a consequence. We just heard it from Michael Schellenberger, who's been all over this story for many years, that is not true. Do you actually have any...
You can't have it, by the way, both ways. And let me just say this. Number one, I love how a moment ago everybody's like, oh, you can't trust the government. But now you're quoting the government saying no one died and no one was harmed because of this. That is total crap. I will quote now for you the Taliban spokesman who said, we're studying the report when the report came out. He then said, after the files were released to the public in the summer of 2010, quote, we knew about the spies and we are working to find them. We will be investigating through our own secret service whether the people mentioned are spies or working with the U.S. and if they are U.S. spies, quote, then we know how to punish them. Fast forward. They then put executions online and then said that they had actually killed people on their websites, on Twitter back then before it was X, saying that they had hunted down the people working with the spies.
You're repeating Taliban propaganda. You're literally repeating Taliban propaganda at this.
It's so incredible. He is. He's using the Taliban was trying to create a panic. They saw in these WikiLeaks documents an opportunity to fuel their terror, and they were doing this on social media. And yeah, there is no evidence. There's no evidence that the Taliban murdered anybody who was named in a document. I know this. I said this earlier because there was a general who was testifying, and he was asked about this by a military prosecutor, and then it ended up being found that the military prosecutors were trying to push a lie in court, and it never was raised again. In fact, it was accepted that nobody died in Afghanistan due to the Taliban executing them over WikiLeaks documents. So, anyways, here we go. Let's continue.
Moment, you're spreading Taliban disinformation.
Let me ask you this seriously, because I'm not dumb enough to buy what you're saying right now. Do you actually believe the Taliban wouldn't go out and kill people that were working with the United States of America? Are you that dumb as a journalist to believe the Taliban doesn't kill and behead people that betray them? Like, give me a break.
Why are you spreading Taliban misinformation? You're participating in the Taliban's propaganda information. Nothing you said proves what you claim it proves. In fact, the U.S. government has itself admitted.
Exactly. Nothing proves anything that they're saying. It doesn't matter if you believe that an extremist group would murder people. You still have to have evidence that it happened.
That it did not result in the deaths of any American soldiers or undermine American national security.
You're obsessed with defending Assange and journalists. It's not journalistic integrity, by the way, to go out there and to put everything on the internet when someone sends it to you, which is what he did. An actual journalist who has...
Okay, but that's not what happened, because these sets of documents were transferred, and then he went to the different media organizations, and what's the use?
Integrity.
I agree that he should have redacted some of that information.
What
That's
they were putting out there. But you say, "Oh, you're a journalist. You can do no wrong."
Hang on.
I don't trust the Taliban. I trust Joe Biden.
Y'all, Ben Ferguson wants you to know that he's been doing radio since he was 12, and he's apparently 42 now. So for 30 years, he's been doing hardcore journalism work. So don't laugh at him. Don't you laugh at them. Don't. He's a serious person.
Ben, Michael just made an important, clarification. So repeat that, Michael.
Well, I agree that I think Assange was careless and should have redacted that information, and that's just a separate issue from whether it actually resulted in the deaths of American servicemen or our assets abroad or undermine national security. And that issue, the U.S. government has been very clear. So yes, in this case, I think that the U.S. government had an interest in actually exaggerating the ways that you're doing. You're citing the Taliban as the source of your information. I'm citing the U.S. government.
Hey, everyone. The Taliban said they killed people. So Julian Assange has got to go because the terrorists said so. All right. What's going on here? No updates yet. I guess that means there's more. Piers Morgan. Here we go. I've got number... we'll play this clip here.
Piers, you're better than this. I trust the Taliban will kill you if you betray them because they have a
but do you actually have any
years of history?
I don't disagree with that, but do you have any independent corroboration that they actually killed anyone?
Their own post on social media after this happened in 2010 was clearly pointing to going after and hunting down these individuals.
Yeah, but again, I asked, do you have any evidence they actually killed people?
The evidence that they put out on social media celebrating the killing of people that have betrayed them in the name of Allah. That's the evidence.
Let me bring.
For someone who I believe is a conservative pundit that thinks there's disinformation campaigns behind any adversarial group that wants to challenge the US, he sure is dense about this idea that the Taliban could be exaggerating and lying about what they've done to people, just so that they can, yeah. And then, it's all got this little tinge of Islamophobia to it. Of course, it has to.
The judge who wants to jump in, then I'll come to Louise. Judge.
I suggest you we're losing sight of the issue here. The issue here is the freedom of speech. The issue here is the right of the government to know. The issue is not that a spy take a chance working for the U.S. that his name is going to be revealed. Of course he did. He voluntarily made that choice. That is no reason to punish someone for exposing it. That's not me. That's the Supreme Court of the United States in the Pentagon Papers case, followed universally, except by the government, since it came down.
All right, Louise.
I don't know how Michael can have it two ways. He can say on the one hand, yes, he should have redacted those names because it's dangerous, and then say on the other, but it's okay, guys, because although he didn't redact them in any way whatsoever, nothing bad happened to all these people and they were totally fine. Isn't that a remarkable coincidence? But we have to go back to what the United States government actually charged Assange with. They charged Assange with conspiracy to help release this material, and he pled guilty to it. At the end of the day, the charge only ever carried a 5-year sentence. I am delighted that Assange, a very wicked man, a criminal, a felon, a breaker of the Espionage Act.
Well, hold on. I'm gonna get her gleeful attitude and very sadistic kind of statement that she's leaning into here. But just so I can establish the facts, having covered this case, I wrote a book, also contributed to this with a bunch of fantastic people. And I can't really name them all, but I'll name some of the ones that I know you all know. There was Pamela Anderson, Noam Chomsky, Patrick Coburn, Daniel Ellsberg, Chris Hedges, Caitlin Johnstone, Margaret Kimberly, Alan McLeod, Stefani Marizzi, Craig Murray, Fidel Narvaez, John Pilger, Michael Ratner, Matt Taibbi, Ai Weiwei, some of them, more than half of them. 10 years per Espionage Act offense. 10 years. And 5 for the computer crime offense. And that's how they got to 175 years for a potential sentence if he had gone to trial.
Five-year sentence. I am delighted that Assange, a very wicked man, a criminal, a felon, a breaker of the Espionage Act, has served his sentence in one of the darkest holes in Britain. I hope he hated every single minute of it. I hope he detested it, and I hope his life is ruined. But this was a minor offense. I very much hope he'll be charged with much more serious offenses in the future.
Wow.
It was a 5-year sentence. I like that. Okay. This is fun. I don't take any of that seriously. Judge Napolitano tried to offer some kind of reason. Michael Schellenberger had a pretty good take on all of this. Particularly Judge Napolitano. I know that he had frequently spoke to people who were part of Assange campaign, part of the effort to free Assange. He deserves that credit. And those other two, I mean, look, this was true for a lot of discussions or debates about the Assange case. The people on the side of the government were cuckoo or crackpots, and you never saw the same one. It was kind of like a rotating carousel. I hadn't seen Ben Ferguson go out and argue on Julian Assange's behalf. Maybe he got a lottery ticket, or maybe he took a number and it was drawn. Yeah. So I know that Louise Mensch doesn't like Julian Assange. Ben Ferguson, maybe they found an article he wrote back in 2010 or something he said back in 2010 and Piers Morgan invited him. It could be part of a conservative network. I know that this Talk TV is Murdoch Enterprise. So, is Julian Assange done with this hearing? Let's see. The court is back in session. Assange is going to owe $250,000 on a top. Is he going to? Are they going to put him in prison? I don't know. You know, it's odd to me. He's supposed to get time served. The court will set a probationary period of 1 to 5 years. Now, I'd love to stick around just because I feel like we're going to get some breaking news here soon that lays out the sentence. And why would I want to fire this up and just come back here to report the news? So how could I stall for another few minutes? How about I'm going to take a quick break here, use the bathroom, and then I will be back. And I'll go through some of your comments and we can gab a little bit as we wait for the news here. They're trying to make it through the sentencing hearing. I think it should be close to wrapping soon. Yeah, I guess that's the question of the hour. Is Julian Assange gonna wind up getting sentenced to jail somewhere? Or, well, it's time served, so he would be sentenced and then the judge would look at the belt. Okay, I understand what they're doing. I really wish reporters would have some appreciation for how this works because it's confusing. So if you come to this, you would see on the Guardian's page, they have this collected. They say Assange faces up to 10 years in prison and a fine up to $250,000. After a sentence is pronounced, the court could still set a probationary period of 1 to 5 years. But if you don't know what is happening here, you would be confused. First off, as that says, Julian Assange does not face 5 years under this charge. Like Louise Mensch said, he faces 10. He faces up to 10 years. But because there's time served with his detention at Belmarsh, he's not going to do any time in jail. Now, the U.S. government could impose a fine on Julian Assange. My understanding is they're not going to be seeking some kind of forfeiture. All right. So I don't know that there's going to be any additional money here. They want him to foot the bill for the charter flight. All right. Let me go through these. Thank you, Belinda. Yeah, I did a lot of great work, and I'm pleased that Guilty of Journalism, the political case against Julian Assange, is now a history book. It's one for people to dig into and understand the lengths that the U.S. government was willing to go to punish Julian Assange until a movement backed them down, forced them to back down. Okay. Yeah. I'd like to go do that, and then I'll come do more stream. But I'm sort of like holding it right now. Yeah, I've got this handy. I've been going since last night. Really, I slept for 5 hours. I was up at 5:30 this morning. I did a report for the Dissenter, and I should promote. It was all about how this is the end of the biggest press freedom case of the century. The biggest press freedom case of the century. I had a picture. This fantastic photo of Julian Assange that was posted by WikiLeaks. There he is. He's looking out the airplane window, and then you have his reflection. And since I talk about movies a lot and think about storytelling, this photo, you can pair it along with the bleak, saddening, distressful photo of Julian Assange hauled away in the British police vehicle. And there was a reflection from his face looking outside. That photo had him with the fist. He was like that, holding his fist up. But now this is different. Here he is. He's looking out the window and thinking of a future of where he's going to be free, thinking of a future where he will not be facing confinement. So this was the article I put together. I could read just a little bit from it. My opinion of all of this is basically that Julian Assange came closer than ever to being put on trial. The U.S. prosecutors got closer than ever to putting a journalist or a publisher through an Espionage Act trial in a U.S. court. But Assange and his legal team secured a plea deal, a massive defeat for the CIA, the FBI, the Justice Department, its personnel, who had backed targeting, detaining, and prosecuting the WikiLeaks founder. This was under Biden and President Donald Trump. So Julian Assange walking onto that plane, it hurt Mike Pompeo's ulcers, or he went and had some of the food that his doctor says he shouldn't take because it will affect his diabetes. And then Mike Pence did not like. He was very sad that Julian Assange got a plea deal. Not a good day for neocons. Not a good day. John Bolton, not happy about this day. It wasn't as bad as all the days where the U.S. government won't bomb Iran, but he was really and truly not happy that the U.S. government extended a plea deal, agreed to a plea deal. And I wrote that unmistakably, U.S. government officials have damaged world press freedom by indicting and jailing a non-U.S. citizen and journalist for 5+ years while seeking their extradition. That's horrible. That's the horrific political precedent. It is a political case. But a plea deal does not create a legal precedent. That's something that constitutional lawyer Bruce Afrin told Consortium News. It's something that Chip Gibbons also said on my live stream last night. And I said that by fighting back against this political case, Assange and the movement that supported him successfully dodged a much worse outcome. In general, that's my capsulation. That's the way I feel about this, that the precedent was already there. It doesn't get worse because Julian Assange accepted this plea deal. And I think in general, that is the conclusion of people like Judge Andrew Napolitano and others who understand the way that the legal system works. He wants to be free. The U.S. government holds that desire over his head and says, all right, plead guilty to a charge. When he sits there and he's asked, did you do these things? Did you commit a crime? What did you do? There's a moment in your head where you think about this and it crosses your mind, I didn't do anything criminal. And then what you're asking me to confront is activity that should not be punishable in a court of law. Like, there shouldn't be this proceeding where a judge says, you did this, you did that, okay, you committed a crime, because that activity should not equal what that crime is in the U.S. criminal code. But hey, you hold your tongue, you say yes, and you do it because you know after these proceedings, you'll be free and you won't have to go to prison. It's a felony on his record, but it's a felony on his record in the United States. He's not going to go to the United States. What matters is how Australia sees him. And he's going to have a homecoming party in Australia. There will be supporters lining the streets. They'll be welcoming him when he gets off the plane in Canberra, Australia. And his government wants him to be home. They're not going to, I mean, they'll probably keep a close eye on him, but he'll be allowed to live freely in Australia. And he's not going to try to go to the United States. He doesn't want to go to the United States. He resisted going to the United States for this plea hearing. And I think that Julian Assange, all of this that has unfolded shows the world that the U.S. government will try and define and redefine who is and is not a journalist. It shows that there isn't a lot of credibility when it comes to speaking about other countries that attack journalists. But it also signals that they lost an appetite for prosecuting Julian Assange. And the people who were working for his freedom, they had more energy. They had more commitment. It was a cause. And at a certain point, it just didn't make much difference whether Julian Assange was prosecuted and put on trial because they had already inflicted a certain amount of punishment. Yeah, Neil. I got you, Neil. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, I understand. There's nothing wrong with what you said. I was just responding to it. All right, so what do we got? We got 4 updates here. Is this over? When it's over, I'm going to bounce. Okay, we're hearing about a calculation of sentencing. Julian Assange is entitled to a credit of time served for the entire time he's been imprisoned as a direct result of the U.S. government seeking its extradition. She notes that Assange has described a 14-year deal, but she needs to work out how that 14 years applies here, given that most of it was not a formal prison sentence. Assange's lawyer says he entered the Ecuadorian embassy to seek asylum, remained there under threat of arrest for about 7 years. That plus Belmarsh equals about 14 years. That Assange has had restrictions on his liberty. The U.S. government is only counting the Belmarsh years. U.S. Attorney McKenzie says that's correct. They are only counting the years after he was arrested in relation to this specific case. True. They maintain that Julian Assange's time in the Ecuador embassy was basically life as a wanted fugitive. They don't recognize this institution of political asylum that was extended by Rafael Correa. He shouldn't need more than the time in Belmarsh prison to be off. I mean, look, it's one charge that he pled guilty. And if the judge is going to inflict a punishment of longer than 5 years, that's shocking. There's no reason for that, because most people who pled guilty to one charge would get 4 or 5 years or less. And it was one count of violating the Espionage Act that Reality Winner was convicted. Then this is not violation of the Espionage Act. This is conspiracy to violate the Espionage Act. It's not even like actual violation of the Espionage Act. It's having an agreement with the person who did receive a conviction for violating the Espionage Act. So it's like, being someone's cousin twice removed type of deal. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm hanging on here with you. I thank you all for tuning in. This is my YouTube channel. I'm Kevin Gosztola. I'll reintroduce myself because we've got a lot of people who are tuning into the broadcast. thank you for the donations. I need to fully appreciate those of you who have given, but I also need to suggest that you go here because Google takes like what, 10 to 30%. If you're going to give money, you really should give money directly to my newsletter. And then that way Google does not get any of your donation. Also should be transparent. I thank Nathaniel for the gift. I had to go back a little ways. There was Nathaniel gifted people memberships, and I'm very grateful that he showed generosity because gifted a membership and then became a new member, gifted 5 memberships. This is all good. I do have to tell you that this is not a part of the channel that I have spent time developing. So there's not a whole lot there that is membership only content. I don't want anybody to be deceived into believing that they get something extra. One thing I haven't figured out with this channel, and now I have some time with the Assange case being over, is how do people want to access these video streams? You know, what's the good combination? You have to have this balance between being able to support your work as an independent journalist, but you also want to keep the prices very low. You want accessibility. You want it to be freely available. I think you need a good combination of premium and free content. I think that some of the more essential videos probably should be available not behind a paywall. I always believe that journalism that is in the public interest should not be paywalled. But then there are articles that add and further your understanding of a topic. Those could be exclusives. Those could be premium articles that people access. And that's probably the same approach to the video. There could be things that are more on the entertaining side. Some of you have stayed on with me for a long time before know that in the second half of the show, I would talk about movies. I did have a movie fan show. Those broadcasts would immediately go behind a paywall after I was done. It was something to add to what I do as a journalist. It's a different side of me. And I don't have it here. I had plans to mark the 50th anniversary of Chinatown with everyone. And then this happened. And a chapter of my life, just like Julian Assange's, is coming to an end. I'm going to have an opportunity on Thursday to do a live stream with the Assange Defense Committee, I believe. It's in the works. I don't want to completely give it away, but I've had the honor of doing these events with them throughout the last 5 years. One particular event was incredible. I was asked to moderate, and Noam Chomsky, who I hope his health is recovering well, who's still alive, who I hope, I hope beyond hope that maybe we could hear his voice one more time, and that I would even love to hear him comment on Julian Assange walking free. Noam Chomsky was on this panel along with Daniel Ellsberg. I got to talk to both of them, and they both were colleagues who knew each other. Noam had his own connection to the Pentagon Papers, and he was targeted by a grand jury when it came to the Pentagon Papers investigation. Remarkable to talk to both of them at the same time about Assange. Thank you, John. It's great to finally have news to be happy about. I agree. A real rarity in the past 5 to 10 years. And so rare that we have to give ourselves permission to take a day or 2 or a week to celebrate. And since this has been unfolding in slow motion, it takes a long time. You have the proceedings in the court right now. Julian Assange follow him on the plane. WikiLeaks is tracking the plane just to make sure everything goes well. There's no incidents. And we don't want to take our eyes off Julian Assange until he's safe at home. Well, he'll call his home in Australia with Stella and his children, Gabriel and Max. And I presume his father, John, will be spending some time. I think Gabriel was in the States, probably flying to Australia now, or maybe he's there. And they'll have time to spend with each other. So happy for them. As you say, Tish, justice for Julian Assange. This is close. Being free, no longer being punished by the process. It is mercy. It's not justice. Justice is probably a pardon. I spoke earlier in the broadcast before I got into the second hour. I spoke of Julian Assange and effort to probably secure a pardon. So we'll see. I don't want to get into politics, but Trump or Biden, it doesn't look really good for Julian Assange, but we could always push them aside and say there are people in Congress who are going to probably be willing to come to terms and reckon with what the US government did over the coming years. And hopefully we'll get to a point where he could get a pardon. I mean, dare I say it, it's probably more likely he would get a pardon than any of the whistleblowers who have been prosecuted by the US Espionage Act. If anybody could get a pardon, Julian Assange would get a pardon. Maybe. I don't know what configuration would produce it, but hey, I didn't think he'd walk free this year or next year. Here we are. Special mention of Daniel Ellsberg, who endorsed my book, who showed such kindness. This is what he said about my book. It was on the back cover. He said that he read my newsletter and got updates on whistleblowers from me, and that I was a resource. And John Pilger said we owe a debt to Kevin for his outstanding record of more than 10 years political and judicial persecution of Julian Assange, for this outstanding record of more than 10 years political and judicial persecution of Julian Assange, for documenting what had taken place. So both of them were very kind to me, and they were mentors. They were mentors. Let me take this. I see that my face is being hidden by this. Apologize for that. Julian had people who he could contact while he was in prison. Daniel Ellsberg, John Pilger, Gavin McFadden was a journalist. He had these people who are no longer alive. And then when he was in the Ecuador embassy, he had Michael Ratner at the Center for Constitutional Rights. And Michael Ratner had such a good heart and soul. And you should, there's a book about him. If you want to learn about what he did, it goes all the way back to the Attica uprising, Attica prison. He had a book that was Moving the Bar, My Life as a Radical Lawyer. Truly, like in the tradition of Bill Kunstler. So I recommend that if you're looking for something to read about people who were in the orbit of all of this and dedicated themselves to human rights, you should read about the life of Michael Ratner, who I was honored to have the chance to speak with, who let me contact him whenever I wanted, basically, to get a comment about Chelsea Manning and what the U.S. government was doing to her, and then also to get comments on Julian Assange's case. Okay. Here we go. Samuel's got the news. Given the factual basis that accounts the whole saga of events that constitutes the basis for this very serious espionage charge against you, I am in fact sentencing you to a period of time served. I am not imposing any period of supervised release. There it is. He's going to walk free. He is going to walk out of that courthouse, and he won't be taken into custody by anyone. No police. He's going to be able to go get on that plane and fly to Australia. Judge, here's another thing from Assange. I would note the following. Timing matters. If this case was brought before me sometime near 2012 without the benefit of what I know now, that you served a period of imprisonment in apparently one of the harshest facilities in the United Kingdom, there's another significant fact the government has indicated there's no personal victim here. That tells me the dissemination of this information did not result in any known physical injury. Oh my. Oh my. The government indicated to the judge that nobody died as a result of WikiLeaks. Oh, yeah. Everyone, I'm going to need a moment, because hasn't that been the lie all along? Haven't they constantly insinuated, if not outright said, that people died? Bear with me. I got to get up this thing I had from the dissenter. I wrote about the day that Ellsberg testified during the extradition hearing in September 2020. And okay, so this was the exchange. And there was some back and forth about publishing documents that exposed people to harm. Okay. And let's see. Ellsberg said, not a single person has been identified by the U.S. government when they talk about deaths, physical harm, or incarceration that were linked to the WikiLeaks publications. The lead prosecutor asked Ellsberg if it was his view that any harmed individuals was the fault of the American government for letting Assange publish material without redactions. Heavy responsibility. And Lewis attempted to trap Ellsberg into conceding that Assange had engaged in conduct that resulted in grave harm to vulnerable individuals. He read multiple sections of an affidavit from Assistant U.S. Attorney Gordon Cromberg. You can all hiss. Everyone out there in the gallery can hiss. He was the lead prosecutor in the U.S. Eastern District Court that in Virginia that indicted Julian Assange. So there's a laundry list of allegations that they named local Afghans and Iraqis that were providing information to coalition forces, forced journalists and religious leaders to flee, led to harassment of Chinese academics who were labeled as rats. They fueled violent threats against people who met with U.S. embassy staff, resulted in Iranians being identified and outed, and that spurred violence by the Taliban. Lewis asked, how can you say honestly and in an unbiased way that there's no evidence that WikiLeaks put anyone in danger? Well, okay, so I guess he's saying that they were just endangered, not killed, but damn, if I didn't sit in that courtroom during the extradition trial or follow the proceedings over video and think that they were saying that WikiLeaks had blood on their hands, that people had been killed. That was a lot. So now you go to this, and it's remarkable. The government for the U.S. has indicated there's no personal victim. The dissemination of this information did not result in any known physical injury. I don't really care whether this judge back in 2012 would have accepted this plea or not. It doesn't matter, because Obama was president and he wasn't going to charge Julian Assange. His Justice Department was not going to charge Julian Assange. It's the year 2024, And then Chelsea Manning had the sentence commuted. It appears your 62 months was fair and reasonable and proportionate to Miss Manning's actual prison time. Yeah. So, the extradition request has been withdrawn. Judge Manglona understands all the details of the agreement. Julian Assange says, I do. I'm just reading the updates from The Guardian. Glad that Helen has been here to provide this because as far as I know, there's no live recording of this that we could tune into. There is going to be a recording of the proceeding published to the U.S. Court docket in this jurisdiction. I don't know if that means that I'll be able to download and watch this proceeding. Might have to do that tomorrow. Assange is emotional. Judge declares this case ends with me here in Saipan. Oh, man. So that's it. It's really over. And yeah, Julian Assange, welcome to the world as it burns. There's no World War III yet, but obviously we're on the cusp. Every bit of violence looks like it could be something more severe. That and the massive heat waves, the climate catastrophes, and I think so far he's been insulated from the endless stream of dead babies in your social media feeds. But now he'll have a chance to see what we've all been watching for the last year. That's not fair. I can't do that. I can't go out with that because this is a victory. This is a day for celebration. It truly is the end of a saga. Does that mean that Julian Assange won't ever face any harassment or intimidation from someone associated or affiliated with the U.S. government? Again, I doubt that because he's in a client state. He's going to be in Australia. We'll keep watch. People who know him will have his back. There are David McBride, Australia war crimes whistleblower, Afghanistan war crimes whistleblower in Australia, in jail right now, was a supporter, has been a supporter of Julian Assange, is not free right now to celebrate. I know there's another whistleblower that is facing an upcoming trial. Anthony Albanese gets credit for being there for Julian Assange, but in these particular examples, not good. Not on the side of freedom of expression or freedom of the press. So, but my understanding, Lady Alex, is that David McBride has gone through this because they don't want a larger inquiry around the Afghanistan war, that they just want to be done with it. And they're protecting the United States, obviously. It's a moment for cheer. I'm closing in on 2 hours, and I also need sleep. I've done a lot, and Julian Assange has been through way more than me, so I can't sit here and talk about what I've done in a way that, matters. But I do thank all of you. This is one of the more successful live broadcasts that I've done on this channel. And anybody who bought a book, anybody who ever donated $10, $5, $1 to coverage of Julian Assange's case, all the shows out there that invited me on to discuss this case, everybody who welcomed me to share my reporting. There's breakthrough news I'll be doing on Thursday. I was on Status Coup with Jordan Cheriton, Anti-War Radio with Scott Horton, his show. I did Covert Action Bulletins podcast a few times. There's shows that I'm going to forget, but the ones that with regularity invited me, and then Project Censored's radio show. Mickey Huff and Andy Lee Roth at Project Censored worked at Censored Press, came and offered to do the book that I had And I put together a history book on this, and I do expect this to live on as a record of what the US government did to attack Julian Assange. Just to get it right, I think I might have to see about updating it and including a section at the end of the book where Julian Assange is free. And to say that this political case ended with a political solution. If you've been following closely, you know that all through this, Stella Assange and others, including me, would say that there would be no solution in the courts. There would be no sparing of Julian Assange's life by the UK courts or by the US courts. The only way Julian Assange would walk free was with a political solution, because it was a political case. A political solution is this plea deal. It satisfies the US government and it satisfies Assange and his legal team. And so now people go, Julian Assange gets on his plane, the US government tomorrow, I'll follow and then come back later with some commentary. We're waiting for the spin. I'm waiting for the spin. I mean, I did as much coverage as I have that I probably should not leave the Assange case before I respond to how the US government is going to spin this outcome. I don't actually think this is a victory for the US government, but let's hear the spin of the US government. Let's see what they say and how, I don't know, disingenuous they're probably going to be about the outcome. And then it truly will be over. It truly, there won't be much to add. And we certainly will never have to watch another fucking Piers Morgan Uncensored with Louise Mensch and some right-wing hack, some other right-wing hack who been doing radio since he was 12. He wants you to know he's been doing radio for a long time. So thank you, everyone. You have a good night. It was good to spend the evening with you. And this broadcast will then archive. Anybody should be able to go back and watch it. I don't know if I'll have the time to pull clips. I'm going to be busy as a father tomorrow with my child. I have to take a break from this journalism. And so I identify with Julian Assange. That time that he has been separated from his kids. This is the best moment in a child's life right now. And Julian Assange did not have that. So now he's going to be trying to reclaim that time that was robbed from him, that he didn't get with Gabriel and Max. And I wish him the best health and a speedy recovery from his incarceration. I hope he can become as well as anybody can as they try to move on from 14 years that was filled with arbitrary detention. You've all been great. Thank you. Oh, there's an airport cam. There's an airport cam. Let's just, before I go, let's make sure if we can see Julian Assange, I want to show Julian Assange, and then it's goodbye. Yeah, he truly was charged for the crime of journalism. He's guilty of journalism. The book comes back around. Wow. Holy cow. So, here we go, everyone. Let me let's see. Let's see if we got this. Looks like RT might be there. But I just see a thing about the flight tracker that's going to be heading out. All right. Well, I don't have it handy, but you guys know where to find it. Oh, it's live Reuters on YouTube. Let's see here. Thank you for that. Here we go. We got this from share screen. That's not what I want. That's not what I want. We want this. So we're just sitting here watching as he leaves the courthouse. This is he in there? I guess they're waiting for him to come out. Yeah. There are several media that are there. I'm going to have to go. But this has been good. If you all want to catch Julian Assange, you'll find the live cam feeds on YouTube. And this is where I leave you. Again, let me just plug the Dissenter. That's the newsletter. A link for donations. You've all been great. You're fantastic supporters. Thank you very much. I'll be back with some more independent journalism. Stay tuned.